This is Jeremy with CryoClarity, and in this video we'll be going over the hand and the wrist. To break it down, the hand is made up of 5 metacarpal bones and 14 phalanges, whereas the wrist is made up of 8 metacarpal bones. To label these, we have scaphoid lunate, triquetrum pisiform, hamate capitate, trapezoid, and trapezium. Looking at the posterior aspect, scaphoid lunate, triquetrum pisiform would be on the anterior aspect, hamate capitate, trapezoid, and trapezium. Since the thumb is the most lateral structure in anatomical positioning of the hand, the trapezium and scaphoid bones are the most lateral carpal bones, whereas pisiform and hamate are the most medial. Looking at the hamate, we see that it has a bony projection. This is known as the hook of hamate. A common mnemonic that I like to use to remember the orientation of the carpal bones is straight line to pinky, here comes the thumb. Straight line to pinky, here comes the thumb. Now, looking at the metacarpal bones, the first one is the most lateral. Another way that I like to remember that is that the first one, or the smallest number, pairs with the shortest finger. First, second, third, fourth, and fifth. The metacarpal bones and each phalanx share the same general anatomy, meaning that each has a base, shaft, and a head. Base, shaft, head. Base, shaft, head. Therefore, if I were to describe this specific point, this would be the head of the proximal phalanx of the second digit of the hand. And this would be the shaft of the third metacarpal bone. And I wouldn't have to say of the hand because we only have metacarpals in the hand. The thumb has a proximal and distal phalanx, whereas all the other fingers have a proximal, intermediate, and distal. The joint between the distal and intermediate is known as the distal interphalangeal joint, whereas the joint between the proximal and intermediate is known as the proximal interphalangeal joint. DIP and PIP for short. The joint between the proximal phalanx and the metacarpal bones is known as the MCP joint, or metacarpal phalangeal, whereas the joint between the metacarpal bone and the carpal bones is known as the CMC, or carpal metacarpal joint. And that's a quick overview of the hand and the wrist.